Restore points is a part of the login and permissions in Easy Security. It's actually created every time you publish a permissions. One of the main reasons is, of course, you never know when you need to reverse security, because that's actually one of the key points from restore point. You can go into a restore point and reverse back to an earlier point if you have the same users, the same objects, and the same companies. So it's not intended to reverse security back 3 months ago, but it's intended to just roll back the previous permission to give you some time to figure out what was wrong with the new ones, for example. One option is also to store the objects inside the restore point. It won't store the exact code, but it will actually store the object record with date, time, version list, and things like that one. And in that way, you'll be able to see what code was actually in a certain database back in time also. You can also compare restore points, and that's of course how you would actually see certain things was changed in there. To keep restore points, you can log them. Typically we keep only 20 of them because they don't really have a long-term purpose to keep them, but once in a while, you maybe once every month want to log a restore point, simply so we can go back in time and say what users did we have in the system in 2015, for example. But let's go take a look at it instead in here. Restore points are created every time you would actually go ahead and publish permissions, or also if you publish selected to live up here. If I take a look at a restore point in here, I can take a look at the last one I got down here. I have restore points from live, and I have also restore points from Easy Security, and that's how data technically also move between the two parts of the application actually. But in here, if I look at my restore point from the live system, I'll be able to see the data that is in there. The list of users is in here. The list of permission sets, and under the permission sets I will see all the individual permissions. I have the companies, the objects, object information, and then I can add comments. If I look at objects in here, it's actually empty, and I will come back and show how you can actually make restore points that also contain this one in here. If I go back and make a change to a user like Susan, for example, in here, I will go ahead and replace her security potentially with a different security down here. So I'll go add that one, and I'll just go ahead and make this one no permission in here. So she'll lose a permission. When I now publish this, Susan's permission will of course change in here. Normally when you have permission errors, sometimes you would just end up giving people super data or super simply so they can actually continue their work actually in here. But as you will see, when it gets to the point of creating restore points, I'll actually be able to reverse the security that Susan used to have without actually giving her super. She will still be able to do her job in there. So it's now creating a restore point from Easy Security. It will create one from live also, and then it will use the difference between the two restore points to only write the absolute necessary records into the production. So a very little short updating permissions progress bar. If I go look at Susan's permissions now, I will go use the normal NAV tables for that. I can go see that all the permissions in here, and if Susan used to be able to edit customers, that is of course gone because I ended up giving her some purchase information down here. If she needs to do her job, I would normally have to resort to actually just giving her full permission. But I can actually go into the restore points, and as I will see, it created two more in here. One of this one is actually the one before, and I have a difference of 14 records in here. I can go back here and write a restore point to live, and it will complain that you have to set some values manually, and those ones are additional columns, you have to add them manually in here. So I will have to create permission sets, permissions, user access, and the users in here. So I add these columns, and then I now can go out here and say I want to create permission sets. I want to create permissions, and I want to create user access control. That is really the only three things we're actually changing in live anyway. And it warns you that this one is a task where you have to be careful with, but now I have put the checkbox in, and I can go to the actions and now write the restore point to live in here. So basically, when you have done this one time before, it takes very little time to actually restore a user in here. So if I go back, look at how Susan's permissions are now, I should be able to see she got very different ones in here. So I now got the sales receivable customer edit that Susan used to have, for example, down here. That is one of the things. So the restore points key point here is you can use it for rolling back security. We can also store the objects in it. And as I looked at before, I have no objects in here. If I go to my setup, and I go down to restore points, I have an option here to include objects in restore points. We don't use it for anything in Easy Security. So to keep the amount of data smaller, we just leave them out by default in here. But after I check this and I go back to my restore points, I can create a new one. And I'll just call it with objects. And I will create a restore point from live. You can always create these snapshots. It's actually a good way of figuring out what was changed since last time. If somebody ended up changing something directly under the users or in permission sets, for example, you'll be able to do that one in here. I now have quite a lot more records in here, but of course I get my object records and I'll be able to see date, time, and one thing that is really important also, the blob size. It's hard to change the code, almost impossible to change the code and keep the object size the same. So looking at the code size in here actually gives a good indication if something also changed, even if version list, date and time was maintained the same in here. If I want to keep this for the future, I can actually go in here and lock this version in here. We can also use this restore point for comparing data in here. So I had this restore point I just created. If I want to go take a look at the one I created right before, actually, when I rolled back my permissions, I used to have more in here. And I created this one that I ended up not having the right ones in here. So I want to compare my current security, what it was in 19 up here. So I'll use this function to compare. I want to check what I actually want to compare, and I don't really look at permission sets and all the other things. I'm only really interested in the users. And I'll go and say I have my new one is 21. I want to compare this to my 19 down here, the ones that didn't really work well for me. As I now go here and compare this, it will build data inside a table in here. And I can see I had a user Lisa, and it happens to be that Lisa in my system is actually set up to be the same as Susan. So even if I actually ended up having all those permissions in here, they were now deleted in here. All the one that are bold is all the new information in here. I'll make this one a little wider. Basically, this one tells me all the information in here. I can keep on scrolling down, and there'll be a lot of equal data in here. So there actually is an option in here to only show the things that are interesting. So I'll see Lisa had all these changes, and then it will keep on going, and I can see Susan down here have similar changes and things like that one in here. So in that way you can actually minimize it. This one can of course also be sent to Excel, and you can do further analysis on it in here. But I could go back and say I really only wanted to know what's happened with users since one of the first restore points. And I'll see in here, when we run our installation wizard, we always lock that restore point. So you would have your initial security actor in there. So if I want to go in and say I only want to look at what users has been added, and I want to do this compared to my original restore point that was created a long time ago. And as I now compare this, I'll see a list of a few users that already existed, and then Lisa, David, Michael, and Simon that was actually added in here. So in that way, it is quite useful for comparing over time also changes to security in here. But the key part about the restore points is to limit the amount of data needing to be changed, of course, during the publish process, but also to be able to reverse security to an earlier state if necessary. So it is always creating restore points. It can be used for restoring all the information that was under users and in permission sets. I can store the object that makes a good way of reviewing changes to code in there. And of course, the compare function is how you will see all these things in there.